So I'm really excited to take you guys through this panel session. It's called Driving Public Sector Innovation Through Effective Governance.
So I think you were already on. Sorry.
So just before we start, I will briefly introduce our guests. So we have Gina Johar, who's the CIO at City of Kingston, Karen Handa, who's the CDO Executive Director of University of Toronto, and then Adam Joe, who's the Chief Product Officer at Aption. So I'm the moderator of this session, like I mentioned, but I was actually really intrigued when I saw the topic of balancing innovation and governance. And I don't think I mentioned before, but I was actually at the private sector, and I've only now started my journey in public. And one thing that has really challenged me is balancing innovation within existing governance. It's something that I continue to be challenged with almost every day because it's so important that you operate within these safe guardrails. So with that, I'm going to start with the first question for you, Adam. How could you, can you share how data governance is adapting to advanced technologies, right? Especially in the agentic world. So RAG, agentic AI, digital twins. What trade-offs or lessons do you encounter?
Great, and first of all, thanks for having me. Really excited for the next 2 days. I think how data governance has evolved is, firstly, the scope has changed. As you know, it's expanded, so now not only do you have to govern input data, but you're governing the output of generative AI systems. So that is a lot more on your plate, and I think there's a couple interesting trends that have surfaced. One is this term, people call it adaptive governance. I think one of the key components is kind of decentralizing some of the responsibility of data governance. So people use the term data mesh, but pushing that data ownership to the domain teams and the data owners that know the data best. And then the other trend, which supports this because the domain teams are already strapped, they have other responsibilities, is enabling them with AI tooling to actually govern the AI. So I personally think that makes data governance cool again, because now you're treating it like it's like a product feature that they have big keynote presentations about. You're now doing cool AI stuff to govern your data. And yeah, we had some interesting success with this, helping Natural Resources Canada. They put out these directives to share their data. Different scientists were supposed to share their data sets, but they hadn't given them the tooling to be able to add that as additional responsibility on their plate. So given that, kind of like automatically adding metadata, using AI tools, automatically kind of verifying data quality and model outputs using AI, I think that's how the trade-off between speed and control, the classic trade-off, is best managed by pushing outward to domain teams and then enabling them with tools.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Adam. Just focusing on one thing you said about letting these teams operate autonomously. How do you measure ethical behavior is still occurring within that data set? And I understand you measure data quality and completeness, but with regards to ethics, how do you make sure these individual teams are still handling data ethically?
Yeah, it's tough. I think one, first of all, you need to score your risk for different data projects. So obviously put more focus on the higher risk potential ethical dilemma projects. And then if policies are delayed, kind of enforce them with guiding principles and regular reviews, like human in the loop reviews, steering committees to regularly monitor the outputs of models.
Yeah, that's good, that's fair. Thanks, Adam, for sharing that. Well, our panel today is all about the C-suite perspective, right? So I'm sure our leaders could agree that at the end of the day, it really boils down to people. People are the ones who are dealing with the data. So how do you guys align these diverse leadership so they are working with your governance priorities when they all have different levels of data literacy and there's silos going on? How do you motivate these internal stakeholders to follow your governance framework? Maybe Kieran, I'll start with you.
Sure. So we certainly have at the University of Toronto, Data Governance Council and a strategy that guides our initiatives. But I would argue that The majority of the work is the engagement on the ground with our divisions. So at the University of Toronto, we have about 30 divisions, academic or shared services. So it really is the consultation process whereby we work with them to understand what some of their pain points are, what are their challenges. Hearing on the ground and having real-time examples, I find helps inform the initiatives that we want to roll out and then and prioritize that work. So what I've learned, though, as you mentioned, differing levels of data literacy and capacity for change. I think as data governance folks, we get very excited about a data governance framework. We want to blitz the organization with all aspects of data governance, but it's just, I don't think the organization can always move as quickly as we'd like. So I find that, or I've realized that from a change management perspective, more of an iterative and incremental approach is the best way to roll out some of our priorities. So as an example, we've really worked with the organization to have them understand what data they have within their custody. So each division's accountable for data within their custody. How do they know which data they have? Do they understand what sensitive or classified data, what the classification of data are? How do they know how long to retain that data? So these are the types of questions we get. Mm-hmm. How do we roll out the guidance effectively across the institution so we can actually have them understand and adopt our practices? Yeah. So we're really being very targeted in our approach. And having it, as I say, iterative, because sometimes you educate and you roll out an initiative and you think it's not a one and done. You have to actually go back and I find continually educate our stakeholders and then add additional guidance and through initiatives that we're rolling out.
Yeah, that's great. Gina, do you want to add anything?
Yes. First and foremost, I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to share a couple of perspectives. So I come with a really long background in healthcare, spent some time with cities, and actually just recently transitioned to a new role at Infrastructure Ontario. And one of the things that I've noticed through the public sector is oftentimes what we do is we look at data governance only through the lens of the technical specialty and the technical discipline that comes along data governance. But where the challenges and the opportunities lie is actually within the space that I think I see is like data governance. It amplifies everything that's happening in an organization. So it amplifies leadership, it amplifies risk, it amplifies decision making, it amplifies trust, it amplifies relationships. And in my journey, I've taken kind of both approaches. So perhaps younger days, taking the opportunity to really kind of dive into the technical components related to data governance, and then learning very quickly why it takes so long. And also learning very quickly and being humbled very quickly with respect to really paying attention to the broader kind of temperature of the organization. So what becomes really important is, I think, taking that strategic lens, not treating data governance as a separate and distinct journey. Governance exists in organizations as it stands today, learning a little bit about where are those strengths within existing governance, where are they using strong tools, or they have a stronger kind of trust capability to come around decision making. And then using that, like meeting the organization where it's at from a broader governance perspective to then launch into the data governance pieces. The last piece is oftentimes in data governance, we bring far too technical of a lens. And what it does is it disengages really important stakeholders. So we'll call those stakeholders patients, clinicians, it could be divisions, teams, businesses, right? Or lines of business within an established organization. So part of what becomes really important is also understanding where does that sit back of house? Where does that become mechanically how you deliver kind of a data governance office? Some of those processes are around stewardship, their relationships between analysts and scientists and IT departments, but then some of it is important to have that's more kind of public facing and engaging. So I think very similar, Kieran, to what you had shared and Adam lifting off of what you've also shared. That's been my perspective so far.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for sharing. I mean, like personally at OLG, we have our governance team ourselves, and I find that we need to really motivate people, right, to come on board this governance train. Do you have any tips on which levers work best to help people get really motivated towards embracing the data governance framework? Pretty open.
It's
Kieran, go ahead.
maybe it's a combination of education and getting people to understand. I agree, it can be very technical. So how do you actually make it less ambiguous and tangible? How do you build it into existing business process? So I think that's part of it. I don't know, dare I say make it fun? You know, if there's ways in which you can actually engage the data community to share experiences and actually make it, you know, a core competency and make it feel like it's something that people can realize, I think is also really helpful.
Yeah, and I think to build off of that, Kieran, part of what I see as also valuable is co-designing the governance with members of the organization that are non-technical. That often helps, and it creates that distributed leadership and shared ownership, because part of the challenge is when a data science team, as an example, or an IT department exclusively own data governance, it's very challenging to see it kind of live, breathe within the fabric of the organization. Another piece is like shared purpose, shared vision, bringing it up to the level of what the organization's trying to achieve and accomplish. And the last piece is tabletops. So because it's so new, it becomes really valuable, and it becomes it could be fun when you take a use case or two and start to build that and use that as a way to continue on that data governance journey, or even start. I always say, like, don't be afraid to start that journey. It won't be perfect, and that's the other piece, is we oftentimes aim for this perfection piece that, you know, all of the, whether it's your data classification scheme, your dictionary, like all of that has to be ready. I think is really shifting the dialogue around people readiness, and taking the time to anchor into some really kind of lived, rich examples.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. A lot of good takeaways for when we all go back to make data governance more fun, right, in the workplace. But I just want to go back to the main purpose of this panel, which is around data governance enabling innovation, right? And that was my conundrum hosting this panel. How do you balance both of them? So I was wondering if you guys could identify maybe one or two critical elements that help spur innovation within your data governance framework. Adam? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier, but I think like elevating the data owner to the same stature that like a product owner gets in a tech company, because people are passionate about their data, and in my experience, if you talk to people that own data sets, they already have ideas of what to do with it, and governance is not just policies and frameworks, it's actually, you know, AI tooling. So I think giving that level of stature and excitement helps foster innovation. And one other interesting thing I'll touch on is like aligning that with ownership of your budget as well, because we saw this. Shared Services Canada actually does this really well, but like people will default to, you know, saying, hey, my data needs to be archived forever, and it's as top secret as it can possibly be. So that's kind of a default nature, but, you know, who's actually paying for the archival, who's paying for the storage? It can get really expensive. It's really complex when you start to look at kind of access frequency. So if they own that piece as well, then it just really helps align the kind of thinking to actually make production ready data governance and build it into your use cases.
So are you saying, just to kind of pick on that a little bit, so the data governance team should have access to their own budget to manage data? So like they set the strat plan with buy-in from the business, obviously? So
they should be closely aligned with the owner of the budget. So the way Shared Services does it is if they have a workspace, they have a budget owner with financial authority who closely manages the data owners and data stewards themselves.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Gina, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so a couple of additional perspectives. One would be considering integrating your digital data and innovation roadmap. What it does is it ensures alignment, it ensures that there is a shared and common understanding of what innovation means. I've been in organizations where those roadmaps are separate, And that's actually made a fairly large, I would say, negative impact to speed. So really integrating, thinking about integrated governance as well as part of the maturity path. So not just thinking about data in isolation, but how do you come together to make decisions to advance the innovation agenda?
Yes, sweet, sounds good. So for like innovation in the private sector, right? I was able to move pretty quick, but like I mentioned before, coming to the public sector has been really eye-opening, just to make sure we're safe. But one thing that I have found really intriguing is when I meet people from the public sector, it's tons of questions. What are you guys doing in AI or using agentic AI? You know, like the lovely question this morning, what version of Copilot are you using? There's so much interest, right? And I see it in myself. But then because we're the public sector, we have to balance risk. So I am really intrigued as to your perspective on who owns this risk, right? Once we try to push forward for AI more and more. So maybe Kieran, do you want to go?
Sure. So yes, I think with innovation, we're always trying to catch up, right? To make sure that we have the guardrails in place to, account for this new innovation like AI. So I think ultimately we have to accept that there will be risks that we do need to mitigate, and those could be, failure to comply with legal or regulations, reputational, ethical, operational risk, all sorts of risks may ensue. So, and ultimately, I think that rolls up to the organizational level, but there are functional units, like I said, where we work, where, there is an understanding of accountability. So how do we support those types of units, I think is really important. And how do we catch up, in terms of making sure that we don't stifle innovation, but we want to make sure that we're supportive and mitigating risks. And I like the keynote, it's being risk aware, not risk averse comment. And so I think how do you support an organization and try to keep up? And I think there are some lightweight guardrails or supports and enablers that we can provide as a governance office or as a broader set of enabling services. So I do think it's having, the way I kind of think about it is data governance in our environment is really having a service mindset, service-oriented mindset. Do people contact you as a hub of knowledge, or at least a way of redirecting folks to the right places to have their answers, their questions answered? So we're really in the process right now of making sure that if there are questions emerging from the community, how do we receive them? How do we redirect to what we're calling in our world, in the world of AI, we have an AI kitchen that's evolving. So it's an AI kitchen of data and resources and supports, like ingredients and recipes. You can see how the analogy works. But we want to make sure that we have those types of supports. And so while they are ramping up, the Data Governance Office and other offices really serve as a touch point, and we can be able to provide whatever guidance we can right now. But I do think it's important to be able to move forward and support at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm kind of intrigued with your term for the lightweight governance.
Yeah.
And just, do you have like a slim version of a PIA ISO document that you ask people to fill out, or is this the kitchen idea?
Yes, I mean, so working with our partners in privacy and information security, yes, we are implementing PIAs already, but it's, what tools are available? What am I allowed to use? What type of data can I use in these particular tools? It's that type of guidance that we're working through and making sure that it's clear to those who are using them, but also making sure that we have additional policies that are that are a little bit more formulated. We've done a ton with respect to teaching and learning in the academic side of the house. Yeah. I work more on the administrative side of the house, so we're trying to look at how to enable staff at the university to make sure that they're using it for various reasons.
Yeah, thanks, Kieran. Adam, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so similar to some of Kieran's points, but I think ultimately leadership is going to own the risk, and it's their responsibility to make it transparent and tier the risks, and then provide the frameworks for people to work within the risks, metadata standards, et cetera. But one opinion about risk I feel strongly about is, like, if you're making an internal chatbot, for example, putting a disclaimer that AI content might be wrong is not enough to mitigate risk. Like, there are some next steps that are relatively easy you can take to drastically improve the accuracy of some of these chatbots. And I think if you're already investing in these tools, you might as well take those steps, not only to improve what content gets generated and make sure it's not harmful or false, but also what content gets missed, which is really hard to track. And all these use cases about summarizing these long documents people don't want to read, like it's very hard to know if it missed something.
Sure.
Versus, you know, if you want to make sure it's correct, you can enforce citations, but whether it misses things. So take a couple extra steps to address those risks, and then, you know, tier your risks and make the risks transparent.
Thanks for sharing that. And I guess kind of tying to your first comment on like individual teams having all this autonomy, would you say that it's on the product owner's responsibility to make sure that the LLM that you guys are spinning up, that app, has those hallucination checkers built in, more than just a disclaimer? Like, whose ownership would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a shared ownership. I'd say it's up to leadership to provide the expectation and kind of the monitoring of it, and then it's up to the data owner, product owner to actually execute.
Yeah, true. Great, thanks for sharing. So I guess we're just about to wrap down, and I'm intrigued for you guys to leave one action item that allows people to drive innovation within the public sector. Gina?
Oh, that's a bad question to ask someone like me. I will leave you with many. I think to drive innovation, it's building off of Kieran's point and even the keynote earlier, like there's a people component that is really important. And it's not just about meeting people where they're at. I think it's also bringing a lot of optimism. One of the things that I've noticed is there's a lot of innovation fatigue. People are tired. We're solving wicked problems. And we need continued optimism that's balanced with like optimism's positivity and reality, right? So I think there's a leadership piece that's very important that we sometimes don't pay enough attention to that can help continuously improve that innovation piece. I know it's a bit more emotional quotient embedded, it's EQ, but I do feel that it's a really important piece.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gina. Kieran?
So maybe thinking about the people on the receiving end, where I'm hoping to achieve or find the innovation is actually through better partnership on an enabling service perspective. So I feel like data governance and IT governance and information security, we're so closely related. And I think there's innovation or synergy opportunity by working in a more aligned fashion, I'd say. I argue that on the receiving end, it must be somewhat confusing when you're hearing from different parties. Are there ways in which we could actually coordinate our efforts in a more comprehensive manner, and then maybe make it more digestible or more the users will actually kind of embrace this type of change as opposed to feeling like, oh, here comes another thing that I have to address. So I think there's a way in which we can partner and deliver the work in a more innovative way.
I love that you guys are trying to change the perspective of data governance, right? I love the optimism comment and just the whole vibe of data governance is what you guys are really promoting. And I'm just curious with this perspective, how do you measure it to know that it is successful? How do you measure people's attitude shifting towards data governance? Pretty open.
Yeah, there's a few ways. I think in some cases, like you could do your common metrics, like there's key performance indicators that you could use to start to measure and grasp volume, etc. I think part of it is like, how can we start seeing the outcomes? Yeah. So what is the organization trying to achieve, and are we able to help advance what the organization is trying to do? And to what extent can there be a metric or two that can really help focus in on like innovation and innovative practices? Coming from a space where I think in healthcare, there's a real deliberate effort to bring together IT and data together, right? Like a real integrated hub to create like a single door or single window of service. And through that lens, some really strong kind of outcome-related measures that start to give you an indication that we're heading in the right direction. And then you've got, again, like those I think it's more process-based, like how many you're counting widgets, but I think it's the outcomes that can really help drive.
Sure, nicely said. Cool.
So I agree with everything Gina said. So maybe just even to add, it's the less tangible pieces. I think it's the people response to some of the work that we do. I think in the past it may have felt bureaucratic, compliance driven. I am seeing much more positive uptake from some of the work that we're doing just by having our community understand the value of data governance and the importance to them. So I feel that there's a perfect storm brewing with AI and cybersecurity risks, and so it's opportunity and risk, but I think it really has built some momentum and buy-in for data governance, and so I think there's just a general feeling, I'll say, so less data-driven, but very anecdotal, but I do find that there's the receptivity, the attendance to sessions that we hold, that it's really gone up, and I think that's general, a signal that we are making headway.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, yeah, just build on that. I would say, track the number of ideas you're getting for projects to do with your data. Go out when you're back Thursday, message someone who owns data and ask what ideas they have, and then ask, governance should be part of that conversation. Ask how the use case would incorporate governance, and then track all the ideas you're getting, and you'll see them go up over time as more people get excited about it.
Cool. Well, a few things that I took away from this. I really like the co-designing governance comment that you guys made earlier. I think people are almost always more receptive when they have a foot in it, right, as well. I like changing the vibe of data governance. But I think the true benefit here is that data governance is a partner to the business, driving business value as a side-by-side, right, colleague to the eventual success. So I appreciate your time. Can I open it for any questions? All good? All right. Well, thank you so much, panel. It was really nice to have you here. All right.
Thank you.
Go ahead. There's no stairs. Just jump down. Yeah.